Alright, given the unfortunate news that broke, I did decide to change it from what we did have planned, but that'll be next week. In the meantime, I think you mentioned that a couple of times prior to us actually doing this.
That's correct.
You're probably a little disappointed this probably is not the one you were expecting. You're probably expecting something along the lines of Blazing Saddles versus Young Frankenstein or something. And the only reason I didn't do that, number one, is because this one was already on the list. Secondly, I feel like I could just put Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles together in a versus video, but I feel like they each have like another one that compares to them, so they could each have an individual one.
And they'll probably show up somewhere down the line.
I'm not totally sure what those are yet, but I'm pretty sure there's something out there that they can each go with individually.
Right.
So in the meantime, we're actually going to go to do this one. Because I actually the reason I wanted to do this one initially was because I've been kind of aching to talk about Life for quite some time now. Because it's so, like, it's one of the more underrated movies in the past couple of decades, probably, I think. I know that's saying a lot about a movie like Life, but, yeah. But even though this is kind of our, a somewhat of a Gene Wilder tribute, I would like to go ahead and start with Life, and so then we'll come back around, and end on Stir Crazy. The thing about Life was that, it was the 90s was very much a time for, taking, like, the biggest names in comedy and making them collaborate. That's not really... They take the biggest names in comedy and collaborate them now, but it's usually not... It's usually some Kevin Hart bullshit. But... but in the 90s, when you took, two big comedic talents and put them into one movie, you had, I believe in this same year, we had Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin in Bowfinger, which I love. And then you put Eddie Murphy with Martin Lawrence, and we got Life. And I remember I'm never really quite sure exactly how big this movie got. It was really big in my circle, but I don't really know how much farther outside that it really got. I do see some outside references to it occasionally.
Right.
But I don't feel like it's near as big as it probably should be. Because not only is it hilarious, but there are so many other things apart from comedy that it does really, really well. But obviously, the thing that really, really makes it what it is this relationship between Ray and Claude, who are Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence's characters, who for most of the movie hate each other, but they're probably two of the best friends you'll ever come across in movies. Regardless of the fact that the way that, like, even the way they meet, it's because Ray is trying to pickpocket him, and after he's already been robbed, and then they eventually end up on this task for Rick James, basically bootlegging, and it's very interesting the way this movie uses, like, usually it's a bit contrived or whatever, or it's very, very sudden, but the way they end up going to prison for life is actually quite a series of events. Like, there's so many things that happens that leads to them getting put in prison for life. Because you have to deal with, there's Martin Lawrence getting pickpocketed, which is, well, he got robbed and then pickpocketed anyway, so regardless, he was going to lose that money. Which is what gets him in trouble with Rick James, and then that involves him doing the bootlegging with Ray. Then Ray goes down and gets involved in a poker game and gets pissed off with Clarence Williams III, who you might know as the villain in Half-Baked. And he causes a whole scene, and then everybody sees him getting pissed off, so that when Clarence Williams III gets himself offed for what I guess we're supposed to assume is him banging Pike's wife. Like, that could have just been a casual insult, but that's probably what the vendetta was, even though we don't really go into it. And then they end up getting found with Hancock's body. And it just so happens the dude in charge of putting them in jail is the dude that actually killed him. So putting them away for life is just that easy. And then it's like I said, it's a very interesting series of events to get us there. Another thing this movie does really well is the period detail. I saw this movie at a very young age. I would have probably been 9 when it came out. And so, like, for the longest time, like, even in history classes, every time I would think back to the 30s and what the 30s were like, I would always imagine the way this movie portrayed the 30s is how I saw them in my head. And the whole, obviously, the whole racial thing when they go in for the white-only boys. And the, just kind of, the racism in general kind of didn't exactly, you know, help in regards to Pike and them, I would imagine, especially since they were the guys that found them were so backwoods. So, so there's all that. There's also a really good Wyclef Jean score. Which you don't think... I think he might have also done the music for Hotel Rwanda. He did something in regards to Hotel Rwanda.
That makes perfect sense, given his ideals.
But yeah, his music suits this really well. And I was talking about the collaboration between the two of them. And it's nothing against Martin Lawrence at all. Martin Lawrence is very, very good in this. And can be hilarious, can be heartbreaking, can be infuriating, all that. But I feel like this is an Eddie Murphy performance on a whole other level. I feel like Eddie Murphy's better in this than he is in Dreamgirls. His performance is really outstanding in this, to the point that I don't think people even realize. Because he gets to do his Eddie Murphy thing, but there's also, I love his tirades. These are like the quintessential Eddie Murphy tirades here. When they're having lunch and they're basically making up that story about how they ended up in prison. And he goes on that whole spiel about his killing spree and how he's, if, Goldmouth tries to take his cornbread, part 2 of his killing spree, he's gonna, go down on all you motherfuckers. And it's just anytime he gets to get self, and sometimes just the little things in there, like he'll make little comments, like when he's talking so fast you sometimes can't even catch them all. And one of my personal favorites is when he's talking about losing his dad's watch to Hancock, and Claude basically says, "Fuck the watch," and he says, well, you never say watch to me, you're not allowed to say watch anymore, you say little clock or something, you're not allowed to say watch anymore. I'll knock all your fronts out, we'll see how you go back to New York, and he makes the whistling sound. I just recently caught when they are, they're kind of bickering in the jail cell about what was going on, how they got in trouble with Rick James, and he's basically mimicking him, and he's saying, like, what about you? You were all, oh, I need my fingers for typing. Going back to him trying to talk his way out of it. His whole performance is full of that stuff. But he can also get deathly serious when the scene calls for it. When he's talking about, like, how his dad committed suicide and all that, and just how he's kind of basically the jovial force in all this that kind of gets everybody going, because when they get there, it's like a really bleak place, and he basically single-handedly brings it to life, because Claude's not doing that. Claude's the one that's really trying to stay serious and just get out of there as soon as possible, and Ray's the one that's kind of the first one to say, well, we're here, we might as well, make ourselves at home until we can escape. And weird enough, it actually ends up being Claude's the first one to come to terms with the fact that they're basically going to die there. And it's all very, like, it really touches on some serious stuff once it gets involved. It doesn't forget what the plot is, or what the title is for that matter. It gets really damn bleak sometimes, and doesn't shy away from it. And there's quite a few supporting players too. Sometimes they almost feel like cameos. Like I was just talking about Rick James, of all people, plays the club owner, which kind of came from out of nowhere at the time. And then there's, like, you really can't recognize him either because he doesn't have the hair. His hair's, like, really short. And then there's Bernie Mac, who is Jangle Egg, who's, like, the resident, in today's terms, I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that, but we all know who Jangle Egg is. And now I almost wonder if it's a euphemism in itself that, he's the pitcher on the baseball team. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but, and there's Miguel Nunez Jr., who is Biscuit, who is his lover, who was supposed to be big for a little while there. Remember when he was, like, in quite a few things, and he was in, like, the Scooby-Doo movie, and then he did Joanna Man, and then everybody was like, well, after Joanna Man, you can't ever make movies again. We forbid you. One of my favorite supporting characters in the movie is Nick Cassavetes as Dillard, the guy that's in charge of them. He was fantastic. I can quote you his gun line speech from beginning to end. I do it all the time. Brent Jennings' Hoppin' Bob is really good too. The guy that played Ron Washington in Moneyball. Yeah. Where he's basically like Dillard's kiss-ass sidekick. And then there is, like I was saying though, going on those cases, like we get to know those characters and the characters are really funny. They're played by usually funny people like Bernie Mac. But then there are just some moments that they really touch on. When Biscuit has to come to terms with the fact that he's gay in the 30s, or in this case I think it's the 40s by this point. And I guess he realized that when he went to prison and he was with Django and all that. And so he's just kind of sitting there heartbroken because he's leaving, he's getting out. And instead of basically getting out and trying to figure out what he's going to do, he uses the gun line to commit suicide. And it's like the movie just gets real dark real fast. Because the scene is kind of joyful up to that point because they're basically trying to remake Ray's Boom Boom Room idea. And then that happens and it just really... It really shows you the serious places this movie's going to go and where it's going to take its concept. But then, and the writing itself is also really witty and smart also. Like, there's some one-liners in here to destroy all one-liners. And there are some moments where obviously it gets to the point to where eventually they will get older. And that genius makeup work comes into it. For the longest time when I saw this movie... I was under the impression that Ova Babatunde and Nick Cassavetes were different people. Were like different actors when they got older. But the makeup is just that good. And then you think it might make a turn here. Maybe for the worse in another movie. Where once the years go by and they become old men in prison, it basically becomes a very profane, grumpy old man. And you think this might be where the movie kind of tires itself out and it goes into already explored territory or whatever. The movie gets funnier the older they get. Which is really great. And there's even like points where you can tell like there are moments when their actual laughter is caught on camera. To my understanding, my research tells me that some of the scenes where they're laughing are Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy actually breaking character and laughing, and they just happen to still be in the movie. Like, Martin Lawrence getting one of his toes in the bottle, I guess wasn't supposed to happen, and you can see them start laughing at it. And one of my personal favorites was when they're, this is when they're staying with Ned Beatty, and they're in bed, and Ray's paranoid that Claude's planning something, and they're fighting, and then Claude says, "I hope you pissed the bed with that weak-ass bladder." And they turn out the lights and it goes dark and you just hear Ray say, "Yeah, well, if I piss the bed, I'm going to put the sheets on you." And you can see Martin Lawrence himself start to laugh right before the scene cuts. Because Claude is supposed to be angry with Ray in this moment, but you can see that just before it cuts away. And I thought that kind of brought a real quality of their friendship also to leave that kind of stuff in there. And then there's all kinds of memorable scenes. Like I said, I remember... Like, I was 9 years old when it came out. I vividly remember all the TV spots ending with the cornbread scene. Everybody was quoting that line. There's the scene when he reads Barry Shabaka Henley's letter to him. And it's like, I'm almost still not quite sure what exactly the joke is. But just the fact that the letter reads that everybody in that dude's family is dead. All the way up to it. And they say, the only person who's still alive is your dog, and that's if he gets over the worms. and the frost kept the crops from growing in, and it's just this whole string of bad luck. And then there's the whole scene where they're all fantasizing about their place in the Boom Boom Room is a really great scene. So there's all that. There's obviously the subplot with Can't Get Right. My first run-in ever with Hakeem Woodbine, and for a long time that's all I knew him as. When the superintendent's daughter like grows up into Polly Montgomery and he ends up getting her pregnant, and we have the I'm the Pappy scene with Bernie Mac. That gets everybody. I'm going to assume there's a lot of genuine laughter in that scene as well. where it's like that. It's kind of the it's like the Spartacus scene when they go through that, which is really great. But yeah, and then, like I said, eventually it gets to a point to where, like, we have those serious tones in it, like, we know where this plot's headed, but then we get to that point when Can't Get Right leaves and Noah Emmerich's basically screwed them over. And basically Ray and Claude stop talking to each other, and we get this really brilliant montage of history's events to that song. And this is basically how we're seeing the years pass, and we're seeing... within this montage as it's going, everybody that's dying that's in their group is just seen in their basically doing their normal thing, and then they just kind of disappear out of the frame. And it's this really, really poignant, heartbreaking way to show how everybody started dropping off over the years. And it's a really damn good scene, that montage. I love that montage so much. It's really that's kind of the real turning point in the movie, where it's like, there's still funny stuff in there, but once it passes, and like I said, it almost gets funnier when they get older. But that montage really sets the tone for just kind of settling in with that fact that there's a really good chance they're never going to get out, and just, life and history are going to go by, and then that'll just be the end of them. And it gets really bleak and depressing real quick. But then manages to turn it around by being super hilarious when they're interacting as old men. Particularly when they get to Ned Beatty's house. And it's... so it never forgets all that stuff, which is great. And that's the thing, is funny as it is, and as great as they are in it, and the fact that it's probably some of their absolute best comedic roles... It's also probably their best dramatic roles, too, which really says something about this movie and how it's put together and just all this. Ted Demme was the director, who is Jonathan Demme's nephew, I want to say. He was kind of like, not directly related to him like that, but I think, I think he died shortly after he made Blow. He made Blow, and he also made, like, The Ref. And he did this, and this was very well handled from a director's standpoint, I think. For a director that never really had something, huge on his resume before we lost him. But, I feel like this movie, it definitely has its fan base and the people that can quote it, and they know, Ray and Claude by name and stuff like that. But, it's very much underappreciated for everything that it brings to the table, and not just the fact that it's really, really damn funny. So Anthony Anderson is in there as Cookie as well. I forgot to mention him. So I think Life is actually a great movie. Not just a great comedy, but just a movie in general. And like I said, the way they can give both some of their best comedic and dramatic work in the same performance really speaks for them, and the way the characters are written too. It's all very, very strong. So, yes. As far as Stir Crazy is concerned, this is starter Sidney Poitier is the director, which is very interesting, especially for a movie so outlandishly comedic for an actor that's typically quite serious for the most part. Now, he did also direct Ghost Dad. Okay, but still, Stir Crazy obviously is quite a bit of step above that. Where really the thing that really makes this stand out the most, obviously, was this dream team that was Wilder and Pryor. I believe it started with Silver Streak, and then went on. Pryor was supposed to be Cleavon Little's part in Blazing Saddles, and that fell through. So that would have been interesting to see. And then this was I think this was the highest grossing of all their partnerships, which is weird because it was kind of in the middle. Because then they did Silver Streak, which is, good enough, and then they do this, but then, many years later, they did See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and then Another You, and I hate to disrespect them, but, Another You is absolutely, positively terrible. And it really almost soiled this, but these movies are still here to keep it alive, movies like Stir Crazy. And what's really great here is that's really all it stems from, is just watching the two of them work together is what makes this movie so memorable and so a movie that everybody knows. That scene when they just go insane in the prison. They just kind of went for it. There was no plan. There was no anything. There was nothing. They just completely decided to lose their minds and just went for whatever came to them. And I heard him telling a story. I think it was a long time ago on a Conan appearance. Gene Wilder was telling the story about how they never really clicked off the set. Like, they never became friends or anything, and even when they were working together, sometimes there were things, because Pryor was on everything but roller skates at the time, and it was very, very hard to get into the set, and it made everybody irate. Apparently Pryor was very hard to deal with, like, all the time, on, like, the set of most of his movies. And Wilder came from a totally different place than that. You know, Wilder's known for basically being his exact opposite, more or less. And then they just come together, and Wilder's telling the story to Conan about how they just improv and they just went with it. And Wilder had never improv before, in a movie. So he was just kind of going for it, and Pryor was going for it, and they just kind of clicked in this scene immediately, to the point that they both started humming like some Laurel and Hardy tune, like in sync. And they were just kind of saying, like, were you aware that were you just going to start humming that tune? And he was like, no, were you going to do that? And it's like, for some reason, they both just kind of started humming the same tune after that scene. And it was like, they were just so, like, in the moment together. It was like this really freaky occurrence. And they were so on the same level. And that really speaks for just how well they connected on screen, regardless of what off camera was like, or how different the backgrounds they were coming from, entertainment wise and otherwise, with this. And obviously it's full of a lot of sight gags too. It's a very, very classic piece of comedy. The whole movie is like there's the speed bag in the bar, and then there's the my personal favorite when he's trying to when Pryor's trying to light the match to light the guy's cigarette when they first get there. And so he basically starts trying to rub it on his face to just get it to work and to do something, and then it just strikes once against the dude's chest. I always love that. And then the another thing that feels very, very classic, almost like it'd be like Laurel and Hardy or something, or Abbott and Costello or something, where it's one of them is like, I think it's Pryor is like halfway out of his jeans when they wake up. And then they both need to hurry up and get dressed and do whatever. So one of them goes on to put their leg through the other leg of the pants that the other one's already wearing, and they're it's just this really great visual gag. And there's so many classic scenes. I think most of which is probably apart from the scene where they just go totally off the wall, is when they first get there and Pryor's trying to tell him that he needs to get bad. I think everybody, and if you haven't seen the movie, I think you know that scene. When he's saying, like, yeah, around here you gotta get bad or you're gonna get fucked. And you see Wilder's attempt at getting bad. And it's... it's all comedy gold. And you obviously would not expect that from any less from them. And obviously there's the side characters and there's stuff like that. I was having a conversation with my dad the other day. He was calling after the news broke. And he was saying that he saw this in the drive-in when it came out in 1980, and he probably hadn't seen it since. And the very first thing he remembered about the movie was Grossberger, the really big inmate that's like basically the guy that they think is going to kill them and tear them apart and probably rape them to an extent. And he actually ends up being like really soft-spoken, and he can like sing beautifully. It's an old cliche now, but at this particular time, I think it was like this really... surprisingly, it was comedic because of how unexpected it was coming from him. And then there's obviously there are some of the gay stereotypes. There's Pryor's on, my name ain't no goddamn sweep. There's some other jokes in there, like the fact that the warden's last name is Beatty, so he's called Warden Beatty. And then there's and then there's like there's the stuff with Wilder in the Garden and stuff like that. There's Craig T. Nelson is in there as well. Jonathan Banks, who most people know from Breaking Bad, is the guy where he's an inmate, but he's also kind of like a guard also. And there's the what was that? It's when I think Wilder's talking about somebody that like intimidated him or something. Or no, somebody tried to intimidate him, and then he beat the shit out of them at camp, and then he's like, yeah, his parents had to come and get him in the middle of the season. And that's, okay, if there's one thing, though, there's a couple of things I'm maybe not a huge fan of that I feel like kind of makes the movie fall short of the comedic genius that's happening on screen, and that's, the inclusion of JoBeth Williams' character is very pointless, I suppose. Like, I guess they felt like Wilder needed a love interest, so he has a love interest on the outside from the inside, and there's hardly... They talk about a place in the sun, but other than that, there's not really too much of a connection. But then we have to have like the ending kiss and the fact that she leaves with them or whatever. I don't know. It all feels kind of pointless. And the whole I was never that crazy about the rodeo subplot. Like it almost felt. I mean, I know it's a really wacky, crazy comedy and all that, but the rodeo plot always felt a little bit too contrived to me. But I mean, I feel like if it was just kind of a straightforward prison movie or like some kind of a I guess, an escape type thing or something that's a little less contrived than the rodeo thing. I feel like we could have had something really, really great. But it's script problems and stuff like that. That's really only the movie's major flaw because watching this dream team play these parts couldn't be more perfect. So I feel like the movie's not quite up to them. But it's very, it's a very good setup for this particular pairing. So obviously, I prefer Life by quite a bit because I just feel like Life is almost a truly great movie. In all honesty, and Stir Crazy is basically just an excuse for two comedy geniuses to show off in a story that's not quite up to par with what they have to bring to it. So.
That's going to be, I guess you would say, this is our tribute to Gene Wilder.
We'll connect this with the Wonka video I did like a month or so ago.
I'm going to re-put it up. I think I actually put it up yesterday. I'm pretty sure I did. So that's going to go up. That's already up now, so you can check that out. I don't care about views. I think someone needs to check it out because it's a good tribute, honestly. It really is because we really very well put over Gene Wilder.
Yeah. It's like you look at stuff like this and stuff he did in Pryor with stuff like that, but I feel like he never quite reached the height that he did when he played Wonka. I think a lot of people probably agree with that.
I mean, will we do Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein down the line? I would say probably so, as long as we can find something that fits with them.
Yeah, I'd love to do Young Frankenstein. I'm not as big a fan of Blazing Saddles as most people.
Right.
But I'd be very excited to talk about Young Frankenstein.
Indeed. That's going to end Versus this week. Continue to watch the other content here on the podcast network, and we've got a lot of really cool things coming in the next several weeks and in the next several months. So there's a lot of good stuff coming. I will state your Versus next week is going to be Hawks. This was the one we were going to do last week, and of course life took its course and we had to switch everything around because it made sense to go that way, honestly.
Yes.
So, movie reviews next week, so stay tuned for that. And, like I said, Podcast Network on Facebook fan page, on Twitter, and on Zazzle for merchandise. That being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there.
Merchandise.
What?
Merchandising.
Yes. That being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?
That's it.